You can't own the sky, Delilah, I yelled, standing on the edge of my porch with my drone hovering midair above her driveway. She stood below it, eyes blazing, fists clenched and raised toward the clouds like she could punch the sky into submission. Her voice echoed through the cul-de-sac, sharp and accusatory, as she claimed I was using the drone to spy on her. The irony of it nearly made me laugh. My drone wasn't even facing her house. It was focused on the hills behind our neighborhood, capturing the amber hues of another Silver Pine Ridge sunset. It was something I did every evening without fail. The footage wasn't for surveillance. It was for peace, for beauty. But that evening, something shifted in her. Maybe it was something as small as a shadow across her lawn, or a sound she didn't recognize. Whatever it was, it flipped a switch inside her. With a dramatic sweep of her arm, she pulled out her phone and called the police. From where I stood, I could see her pacing and waving, her movements frantic, as if she were directing air traffic rather than making a noise complaint. And sure enough, moments later, the quiet of our suburban street was shattered by the wail of sirens. That was the moment I realized I wasn't just dealing with a nosy neighbor. I was dealing with someone who thrived on control, someone who saw every drone flight as a threat to her personal dominion. What she didn't know was that while she was busy weaponizing HOA bylaws, I was preparing something stronger. She wanted to fight over local rules, but I was already researching federal airspace laws. I wasn't about to back down, not when I knew I had every right to do what I loved. And by the time the story ends, I would be flying over her house with full FAA approval, while she could do nothing but glare up at the sky. My name is Ryan Bennett, and until recently, I lived a quiet life in Silver Pine Ridge, a small, meticulously maintained neighborhood tucked between rolling hills and whispering pine trees. The kind of place where most people just wanted to mow their lawns, wave politely at one another, and be left alone. And that suited me just fine. I work from home as a digital architect, a job that required long hours of intense focus and left me drained by the end of the day. Drones, those sleek, humming marvels of engineering, were my escape. Every evening, just before sunset, I'd launch my drone from the edge of my backyard and watch it glide silently through the golden air. The world looked different from up there. Calmer, better. The rooftops glowed beneath the fading sun. Kids played in driveways, dogs chased shadows, and birds carved effortless paths across the sky. Through my lens, I found beauty in the ordinary. It wasn't just a hobby, it was therapy, a ritual, a way to end each day with stillness and perspective. Then Delilah Moore moved in. From the moment she arrived, something felt off. She was the kind of neighbor who sized you up before she said hello. The kind who made notes about things you didn't even realize were problems. Trash bins an inch too far to the left, porch lights a shade too dim, mailboxes not matching the HOA's aesthetic. She'd only been there for 2 weeks before I heard her voice for the first time. I was outside calibrating my drone when she walked up, arms folded so tightly they looked welded to her ribs. She didn't introduce herself, didn't ask how I was doing. She just said, "Do you mind not flying that thing near my yard?" I was polite, respectful even. I explained that the drone was never flown below legal altitude and never over private property. I even pulled up the footage on my tablet and showed her a time lapse from the night before, sunset lighting up the hills, the drone never once turning toward her home. She didn't even glance at the screen. "It doesn't matter," she said sharply. "People have a right to feel safe." But that wasn't what this was about. Not really. Delilah wasn't interested in truth or compromise. She was interested in control. And once she realized she couldn't control where my drone flew, she turned her attention to something she could manipulate: the homeowners association. That's when everything changed. It started with an email, formally worded, dressed up in politeness, but cold underneath. "Dear Mr. Bennett, it has come to our attention that multiple residents have expressed concern regarding the operation of unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, within the community." I didn't need to read further to know exactly who was behind it. Multiple residents? I'd lived in Silver Pine Ridge for 4 years. I knew my neighbors. I'd shared holiday cookies with the Johnsons next door, a sweet retired couple who often asked to see the drone footage after particularly nice sunsets. Across the street lived the Gonzalez family. Their daughter Mia had once been featured in one of my time-lapse, drawing chalk art across their driveway as the sky turned purple behind her. Everyone I spoke to, every single person, had nothing but curiosity or quiet admiration for the drone. This wasn't a community concern. This was Delilah Moore playing her first card. The HOA letter claimed I was violating ambiguous privacy expectations, hinting at potential fines if I continued to fly over common areas or areas prone to privacy invasion. It was intentionally vague, crafted to sound legitimate, but hollow if you press on the details. I didn't get angry. I got precise. I sat down and wrote a response, carefully composed and reviewed by a lawyer friend. I cited federal regulations and included GPS flight logs showing I'd never flown below 400 feet, nor hovered over private property. I even attached FAA documentation outlining the exact guidelines I followed. My email was calm, courteous, and unshakably legal. But I wasn't dealing with people who cared about rules. The very next morning, I saw her, Delilah, standing on her porch with a steaming mug in hand, staring straight at my front door like it owed her money. She didn't wave. She didn't blink. She just stood there, radiating disapproval, as if her presence alone could intimidate me into surrender. That night, I launched my drone again. I deliberately avoided her street, kept the flight path far from her property. I filmed the community park, the orange skyline, the slow blink of stars appearing overhead. 15 minutes into the flight, I heard sirens. At first, I thought maybe someone had a medical emergency. But no, those flashing lights were meant for me. 2 police cruisers rolled up slowly, and 2 officers stepped out, their faces split between confusion and boredom. Delilah had called the police. Again, she met them in the middle of the road, animated and breathless, waving her phone as if she'd just caught me committing espionage. Her words cut through the quiet street like a blade. He's surveilling my property. He's filming my windows. I feel unsafe. The officers made their way to my front door, where I was already waiting with the drone, controller still in my hand, and my tablet powered up. I explained everything calmly. I showed them the footage, rolling hills, trees swaying in the evening breeze, and absolutely zero evidence of anyone's private residence being filmed. They nodded, exchanged looks, then glanced over at Delilah, who was now recording the entire encounter with her phone. "This seems like a civil matter," one officer said, clearly unimpressed. "As long as you're within FAA guidelines, we don't have jurisdiction. Just try not to bother your neighbors, okay?" I nodded, because legally, I didn't need to say anything else. But inside, something was building, an ember lit by her false accusations, her manipulations, her need to dominate. Delilah didn't want peace. She wanted obedience. And when she couldn't control my drone, she set her sights on controlling me. What she didn't realize was that I had just started recording everything. From that moment forward, this wasn't just about a drone. It was about power, and I wasn't going to let her take mine without a fight. A few days later, I walked into my first ever HOA meeting. I wasn't there to argue. I was there to observe, to understand the battlefield Delilah had claimed as her own. The community center's multipurpose room smelled faintly of lemon disinfectant and lukewarm coffee. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Folding chairs had been arranged in neat rows, and there at the front, just as I expected, sat Delilah Moore. She was already deep in conversation with 2 board members when I arrived, whisper with that practiced air of false confidentiality. She noticed me walk in. Her eyes narrowed. Then she leaned in again and said something that made both board members chuckle. I sat quietly near the back, listening as the meeting unfolded. Landscaping budgets, parking policies, talk of repainting the neighborhood signage. All standard. But when the agenda shifted to new business, Delilah stood up with theatrical precision. She held up a manila folder, like it was state evidence. Inside were printed screenshots, poorly cropped images of drones, some from my own footage, others obviously pulled from Google. "I'd like to propose an amendment to the bylaws," she began, loud and righteous. "A ban on all drone activity in Silver Pine Ridge. Residents have the right to feel safe in their homes without being filmed or surveilled. Murmurs echoed around the room. One board member looked puzzled. Have there been any documented violations? Any harm done? Delilah straightened. Do we need to wait until someone's child is filmed before we act? Her voice cracked slightly. A performance. These devices are watching us. It's only a matter of time. I stood up. My hands weren't shaking. My voice was calm. I'd like to respond. The room turned to me. I have never flown over a private home below the legal limit. I have GPS logs, timestamps, FAA regulations printed and highlighted. I fly over public areas only, at federally approved altitudes. My drone does not hover over backyards or windows. Delilah's glare could have set the walls on fire. Then maybe the law needs to change, she spat. And there it was, the heart of it. She wasn't fighting for privacy. She was fighting for power. And the fact that federal law didn't bend to her made her furious. After the meeting, two neighbors approached me quietly. One was Mr. Patel, a retired engineer who lived a few houses down. The other was Lisa from across the street, Mia's mother. They each looked around before speaking, like they didn't want to be overheard. She reported my fence 3 times, Mr. Patel whispered. Claimed it was half an inch over the height limit. Lisa added she filed a violation against Mia's chalk art, called it graffiti. The pattern was suddenly clear. Delilah wasn't just coming after me. She had been building her own little fiefdom, one citation, one complaint at a time, using the HOA not as a tool for community order, but as a weapon to enforce her version perfection. She didn't want a peaceful neighborhood. She wanted control, and anyone who didn't kneel was going to feel her wrath. That night, I stood in my garage with the drone on the workbench, its matte black surface gleaming under the soft overhead light. I had a decision to make. I could yield, stop flying, keep the peace and let her win. Or I could go deeper, higher, stronger. I opened my laptop and started researching FAA certification, airspace rights, legal precedents, drone operator licensing. And what I found changed everything. Delilah thought she was playing chess. She didn't realize I was about to switch the board. That night, as the rest of the neighborhood drifted into sleep, I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by FAA documents, highlighted notes, and bookmarked legal articles. The more I read, the clearer it became Delilah may have held sway over our HOA, but she had absolutely no power in the air above our homes. The airspace above residential neighborhoods, that's governed by the Federal Aviation Administration. And unless I was flying recklessly below legal altitude or directly invading someone's privacy with targeted surveillance, none of which I had done, Delilah and the HOA had zero authority to stop me. I wasn't just protected. I had options. With the right application, I could take my drone operations beyond a simple hobby. I could become a certified FAA Part 107 drone operator. That certification would allow me to conduct scheduled flights, document aerial footage, and even use my drone for commercial or educational purposes, legally, officially, and daily. So, while Delilah was busy printing flyers and gossiping about the drone guy, I was already taking steps to make sure her complaints had no legal footing. But I wasn't naive. I knew she'd keep pushing. People like her don't back down quietly. They double down. I needed allies and guidance from people who had dealt with this kind of conflict before. That's when I turned to the online drone community. Forums, subreddits, pilots groups. I posted a carefully written summary of my situation, leaving out names but sharing the heart of the story. The response was overwhelming. Within a day, I had over 100 replies, most offering encouragement, some sharing eerily similar stories, and a few providing practical, legal suggestions I hadn't even considered. One message stood out. It was from a man named Mark, retired military drone operator, now a consultant for commercial drone startups. His message was short, direct. You're not alone. Let's talk. We scheduled a Zoom call the next evening. Mark's background showed a cozy study line with aviation books and framed aerial photographs. For 2 hours, we talked. He walked me through the FAA Part 107 exam process, how to register my drone commercially, how to create detailed flight logs, and, most importantly, how to prepare a recurring flight operation plan that could be submitted directly to the FAA. If approved, he said, you'll be able to fly every day over the same zones for documented photography or educational purposes. And there's not a damn thing your HOA or your neighbor can do about it. That's when it hit me. I didn't need to win her game. I could change the game entirely. I began assembling everything I needed: certification requirements, test prep materials, operation plans, diagrams of flight paths. I filed my intent with the FAA, citing community photography as my purpose. Every piece of documentation was backed by data, timestamps, and safety protocols. Meanwhile, I also reached out to a local real estate lawyer, someone who specialized in HOA disputes. Her name was Vanessa. She was calm, intelligent, and as sharp as broken glass in a silk glove. After reviewing everything, the warning letters, the police reports, the community meeting notes, and Delilah's brother's so-called cease and desist, Vanessa smiled. They've overreached, she said, and they've left fingerprints all over it. She drafted a formal notice to the HOA outlining the limits of their jurisdiction and the potential liability they could face for interfering with lawful activity. She didn't threaten, but the language was firm, polished, and surgical. The kind of letter that doesn't start a war, it ends one. We mailed it to every board member. And Delilah, while she was still trying to ban drones in neighborhood meetings, I was already preparing to fly mine with federal approval. The skies were opening, and this time I'd be soaring with the law behind me. Just over 2 weeks after our letter went out, my FAA Part 107 certification was approved. The exam hadn't been easy. There were sections on airspace classifications, weather systems, and emergency protocols, but I'd studied like my piece depended on it, because it did. When the passing notification hit my inbox, I exhaled like I'd been holding my breath for days. With help from Mark, I submitted my recurring flight operation request to the FAA, complete with mapped flight zone, scheduled times, and detailed safety protocols. Less than a week later, I got the email that changed everything. Approved. Not conditionally. Not pending. Fully approved. I printed the letter, laminated it, and tacked a copy to the inside of my front window. Not as a flex, but as a clear, unmistakable signal to anyone watching. I was no longer a hobbyist with a toy. I was a certified drone operator with federal authorization. The skies over Silver Pine Ridge, they were mine now, legally. That weekend, I printed a 1-page notice and delivered it to every mailbox on the block. It read, Dear neighbors, I'm pleased to share that I received full FAA approval for scheduled drone flights over the Silver Pine Ridge area, focused on photography and community landscape documentation. These flights will occur during set hours, and if you'd ever like a photo of your home, garden, or events, let me know. I'm happy to help. Warm regards, Ryan Bennett. I wasn't seeking revenge. I was building goodwill. I knew the rumors Delilah had been spreading about me spying, stalking, invading. I wanted people to see the truth for themselves. And they did. People began waving at me as I flew. One neighbor asked if I could take a photo of their backyard garden in full bloom. Another asked if I could get a shot of their roof, just to check for damage after a storm. I didn't charge anyone. It wasn't about money. It was about reclaiming my place in this neighborhood. But when Delilah found out, she imploded. I was inside editing a sunset reel when I heard the slam of her screen door. Seconds later, she stormed across my lawn with a stack of papers in hand. My FAA letter among them, reprinted and highlighted in aggressive red ink. You think this means you won? She shouted, voice shaking. This is an invasion of my rights. You're weaponizing the airspace. I opened the door just enough to be polite. Delilah, I said quietly, I'm not breaking the law. I'm following it. I didn't argue. I didn't need to. I simply pointed to the laminated FAA certificate hanging inside my front window. She stared at it, trembling, not from fear, but from fury. Her mouth opened like she wanted to scream something else, but no words came. Instead, she turned and stormed off, heels crunching on gravel, slapping her rolled papers against her thigh. That night, as the drone lifted into the sky for its first official flight under my new certification, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks: peace. The sun painted the hills in gold, the rooftops glowing beneath the last light of the day. Even Delilah's house, once the center of all that noise, looked small from up here, tidy, quiet, and unremarkable. For the first time since this all began, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. I wasn't holding my breath. I wasn't waiting for the next fight. I was just flying, and I was flying free. 3 days after my first federally approved drone flight, I noticed a news van parked at the entrance to Silver Pine Ridge. At first, I thought it might be for some local fluff piece, maybe a story about the spring garden tours or a community yard sale. But when I saw Delilah Moore standing by the sidewalk with her perfectly curled hair, a folder of papers clutched to her chest, and a microphone in her face, I realized exactly what was happening. She wasn't done fighting. She was taking the battle to the public. A reporter stood beside her, nodding seriously, while a cameraman framed her against a backdrop of the cul-de-sac. I slowed my walk to the mailbox, catching fragments of her speech as I passed by. Invasion of privacy, constant surveillance, emotional distress, we don't feel safe in our own homes anymore. She mentioned my name at least twice, loud enough for me to hear, soft enough to claim it wasn't direct slander. She was smart like that. That night, the segment aired on the local news under the headline, "Drone Danger in the Suburbs?" It was less journalism, more sensationalism. A few shaky stock videos of drones, a B-roll clip of Delilah gesturing dramatically at the sky, and a quote about her dog supposedly developing anxiety from the drone's hum. What the story didn't include: my FAA certification, my compliance with every airspace regulation, the fact that no footage existed of her home, her dog, or anyone else's property, or that the drone never flew anywhere near her yard unless it was passing through common airspace. It was a hit piece, a shallow, emotionally charged hit piece designed to stir up fear and paint me as a villain. Fortunately, I had been preparing for something like this. That same evening, I posted a calm, factual statement on our neighborhood's online forum, a space many residents followed. I included screenshots of my FAA approval, time-stamped flight paths, and stills from the drone's footage, none of which came within 200 feet of Delilah's home. I never once used her name. I didn't need to. Within hours, the tide began to turn. Neighbors started chiming in. One wrote, "He flew over our house once, got the most gorgeous sunset shot. We asked him to do it." Another added, "Didn't Delilah, also report that kid's lemonade stand last year? This feels like her usual drama." And then came the memes. Someone photoshopped an HOA badge onto a still from the news segment and captioned it, "Delilah Moore, Sheriff of the Skies." It went viral in the community chat group. People were laughing. But more importantly, they were seeing her. The ones who had stayed silent before, they started to speak. Neighbors who had been fined for silly infractions began to ask questions. A few shared stories of their own. Turns out, Delilah had tried to cite someone for disorderly lawn ornaments and another for excessive wind chime volume. Her web of control was unraveling, and fast. But Delilah wasn't finished. At the next HOA meeting, she showed up early and smug, binder in hand. 3 of the 5 board members were already seated, 2 of whom had long been in her corner. I knew she was planning something big, and I was ready, because this wasn't just about drones anymore. This was about someone trying to twist a community into submission. And what happens when people start standing up to that kind of power? That HOA meeting was unlike any other. The community center was more packed than I'd ever seen it. Normally, these meetings struggled to fill even half the folding chairs, but tonight, it was standing room only. Word had gotten out. People wanted to see what would happen next. And Delilah, she was absolutely ready for her spotlight. She stepped up to the front of the room, clutching her overstuffed binder of printouts, and launched into what she clearly believed was a speech worthy of national television. "Drone flights are disrupting our peace," she declared, flipping dramatically to a photo of a random quadcopter. One that definitely wasn't mine. "Our children are being filmed. Our pets are distressed. Our skies are no longer safe." She placed the binder down with a thud and stood tall, relishing every pair of eyes in the room. Then she dropped the real bomb. "I've drafted an amendment to the HOA bylaws," she said, waving a set of papers. This will ban all drone flights over Silver Pine Ridge. Permanently. My brother, who is an attorney, helped me prepare the legal language. I submit this proposal for immediate vote. There was silence, uneasy, heavy silence. And then I stood up. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I calmly handed each board member a packet. Copies of my FAA certification, annotated federal regulations, GPS data logs, and a formal legal statement from Vanessa, my attorney. As most of you know, I said, I am a certified FAA Part 107 drone operator. I fly within federal guidelines, above minimum legal altitude, and only over public or permitted space. According to federal law, the HOA has no jurisdiction over navigable airspace. Attempting to enforce a ban not only violates federal policy, it puts the HOA at risk of legal liability. I paused, scanning the room. If this amendment is passed, I will challenge it, not as a neighbor, but as a licensed professional protected by federal law. That last line landed. I could feel the shift in the room. But what happened next was something I hadn't expected. Lisa, quiet, sweet Lisa, stood up from the back of the room, her voice trembling but strong. My daughter Mia got fined last year for chalk drawings on our driveway, she said. Delilah called it vandalism. A few people gasped. Then Mr. Patel spoke. She's reported my fence for being too high 3 times. My fence hasn't changed in 15 years. Then Charles, who had been quiet until now, added, she tried to get me cited for having 2 cars in my own driveway during a family party. One by one, neighbors began standing up, sharing their stories. Stories of pettiness, of intimidation, of quiet bullying that had gone unchecked for too long. It was like a dam breaking. And Delilah, her composure cracked. Her eyes darted across the room, her smile frozen in place as the voices rose against her. One of the board members, clearly rattled, spoke up. I think we need to revisit our enforcement procedures. This isn't what community leadership is supposed to look like. Another said quietly, I moved to table the drone amendment indefinitely. And then, something unprecedented. A motion was introduced for a vote of no confidence in Delilah's role as Neighborhood Standards Liaison. The room actually applauded. Some people clapped hesitantly. Others didn't even try to hide their satisfaction. Delilah tried to defend herself, accusing us all of turning this into a smear campaign. But nobody bought it anymore. The spell had broken. She had ruled with fear and intimidation for so long, but fear only works when people stay silent. And tonight, we weren't silent anymore. Less than a week after the meeting that shattered her influence, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address, just my name, typed in capital letters. Inside was a summons. Delilah Moore was suing me in small claims court for emotional distress. The listed cause? Unrelenting drone harassment resulting in psychological harm and anxiety-induced insomnia. She was truly trying everything. I took the packet straight to Vanessa. She flipped through it without expression, her polished nails tapping lightly on the table. This is weak, she said flatly. The claims are vague. There's no supporting evidence, and her definition of harassment is going to collapse under basic scrutiny. But we're not going to dismiss it. We're going to bury it with facts. We prepared a full defense. Every documented flight path time-stamped FAA log. An altitude report was organized into a binder. We even created a digital presentation, complete with overlays showing how far I stayed from Delilah's property. Mark helped me prepare a technical affidavit confirming I had followed every FAA rule to the letter. 2 weeks later, we walked into the courtroom. Delilah was already seated, wearing a pale gray suit that tried its best to look professional. Her brother sat beside her, flipping through papers like he was auditioning for a courtroom drama. The judge, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and zero tolerance for nonsense, called us forward. Delilah launched into a monologue so long and meandering, the judge had to interrupt her twice. She spoke about fear, about anxiety, about how she couldn't open her curtains without feeling watched. She showed blurry screenshots of drones, none of which were mine, and read from journal entries about how her dog cringed at the sound of propellers. When it was my turn, I didn't give a speech. I just presented the facts. I showed flight logs, video stills, FAA certification, and legal correspondence. I showed that I never flew under 400 feet near her property, that not a single second of video showed her home, that I had always followed the law. The judge listened, nodding occasionally. When I finished, she looked over at Delilah. Do you have any direct evidence that this operator intentionally filmed or targeted your home? Delilah looked stunned. Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked down at her papers, then up again. I felt like he was. The judge sighed. Feelings aren't evidence, Ms. Moore. Case dismissed. Just like that. Vanessa didn't even crack a smile until we were out in the hallway. She really tried to weaponize anxiety, she said. That kind of manipulation doesn't belong in a courtroom. But the consequences didn't end there. 2 days later, Delilah received a letter from the FAA. She had filed multiple false reports against a certified drone operator. And while they stopped short of issuing a fine, they gave her a formal warning, clearly stating that repeated interference in approved drone operations could lead to federal consequences. She had tried to turn the law against me, and instead, the law turned on her. And finally, silence. No more porch glares. No more flyers. No more HOA letters or fake emergency calls. Just quiet. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I simply launched my drone that evening, same time as always, and watched it rise into the air like it always had, smooth, steady, and free. But what came next, I never saw coming. The air in Silver Pine Ridge felt different after courtroom victory. Lighter. Still, for the first time in months, I could walk to my mailbox without tension coiling in my shoulders. There were no more sudden HOA notices, no sideways glares, no muffled conversations that stopped the moment I walked past. Delilah had gone quiet. Not the brooding kind of quiet, but the kind that comes when someone realizes they've lost more than a fight. They've lost control. Her once daily power walk stopped. The flyers vanished. Her porch, once her soapbox, stood empty, but the drone, it still flew. Every evening, every golden hour, quietly capturing the life below, just like it always had. At first, I thought I'd return to my peaceful hobby and nothing more. But the community had changed. Something had shifted in the way people saw me and each other. Lisa was the first to reach out. She asked if I could take aerial photos of her blooming backyard garden for her blog. I agreed and edited a few shots for her. She was thrilled. She posted them online and gave me credit. Then came more requests. Mr. Patel wanted a photo of his house to send to his grandkids. A young couple asked for a flyover of their wedding anniversary picnic. Another neighbor asked if I could check their roof after a recent hailstorm. I never charged anyone. I wasn't building a business. I was building something quieter, more meaningful, trust. It was Delilah's obsession with control that gave me the opportunity to rise. Not just literally, but in the eyes of the community. The man she once tried to paint as a threat had now become the neighborhood's unofficial drone guy. And then came the most unexpected knock of all. It was Tim, a younger guy who'd recently moved in a few blocks away. He stood nervously at my front door, holding a small notepad and fidgeting with the edge of his hoodie. "Hey," he said, "I heard what you did for Lisa. I wanted to ask for something a little different." He told me about his girlfriend, Rachel, how she loved drone videos, how they had their first date in the park beneath one of my drone flyovers, how he wanted to propose to her during a picnic, with my drone dropping a small banner at just the right moment. I blinked, then smiled. I'm in. We planned it carefully, flight path, timing, even the wind direction. I used a custom 3D printed clamp to hold the fabric banner. We rehearsed it 3 times in a wide open field. When the day came, Tim led Rachel to park while I stayed hidden nearby, drone ready. As they settled onto the blanket, I brought the drone into position. The timing was perfect. As she looked up, the banner released, floating gently down until it landed in front of her. "Rachel, will you marry me?" She gasped. Tim dropped to one knee, and she said yes. The footage captured everything. Sunset behind them, trees swaying gently, and the look on her face when she read the banner. They posted the video online. It went viral. People started reaching out, asking about drone filming for events, real estate, even short documentaries. A drone magazine emailed me for an interview. A podcast wanted me to talk about how a neighborhood feud turned into a story of creative resilience. And through it all, I just kept flying. Delilah's house went up for sale a few weeks later. There was no announcement, no goodbye, just a moving truck and silence. She didn't speak to anyone. She didn't have to. Her power had already moved on. And the neighborhood? It came alive. We organized a community drone night. Families gathered in the greenbelt as I flew overhead, broadcasting a live feed onto a projector screen. Kids waved glow sticks. Parents brought lawn chairs. Someone even set up a popcorn stand. For the first time, Silver Pine Ridge felt like a community, not a rule book. And as I stood there watching the drone drift across the sky, I realized something. Delilah hadn't just lost a fight. She'd built her empire on control and intimidation. But empires like that, they crumble the moment people stop being afraid. Her downfall didn't come from confrontation. It came from quiet persistence, from calm resistance, from staying grounded while I kept rising. And in the end, that drone, once a symbol of conflict, became something else entirely. A symbol of freedom, of perspective, of rising above.